Hi guys, welcome back to the second part of the tutorial. So for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is use the previous tutorial as the basis for kind of laying out a card and showing you how I would go about doing it. I'll talk about all the keyboard shortcuts, but it won't be as long as the previous tutorial because these are things you should have learned already. This is just me reinforcing something, and what I'd like you to do is to create your own layout. After watching this tutorial, I want you to create the layout that we're doing, as well as create another postcard that you lay out with your own images using your own setup and fonts. You don't need to use the exact same fonts that I'm using, but I'd like to see this postcard kind of laid out in a similar way. So you're going to be turning in two images. Both of them are going to be JPEG, so we're going to start. We'll talk about that. So let's get started. I'm going to select Create New. And I'm going, notice that recently it says, oh, you created a 6x4 inch 300 ppi card, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to hit create. In the last video, remember we double clicked background to make it a normal layer. And then what we did was we went to image, canvas size, and we gave ourselves that 1/4 inch our 1/8 inch total bleed by putting an 1/8 inch on each side, which was 1/4 inch altogether. So we changed the size to 4.25. Now you will not need to do this when you get your template from the printing company because they will already have the trim marks embedded, but I'd like you to go ahead and change that, and you'll notice right away that you've got your trim marks. I'm going to open my rulers and put the guides here to kind of give me a sense of where things will be cut off. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new layer just by clicking on this little plus button, and I'm going to call this bottom, or actually I'm going to just call this background. And I'm going to fill this background with a color, maybe something that's like a bright gray. So I'm going to go to the B brightness slider, and I'm just going to select something that's around 93. You don't have to be exact. I'm going to go to my paint bucket tool, G for paint bucket, and just click here, and now this entire layer is filled in. You'll notice that if I turn that off, you see the original layer we started with. So this is my background. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to use the marquee tool to just create an area down here that I'm going to fill with a darker color, maybe a dark gray. So I've selected the marquee. I'm going to go to the paint bucket tool, click on the foreground color, and I'm going to go about halfway down to about 50 for brightness. Obviously it doesn't matter if the hue or saturation because there's no color here. I'm going to hit OK, and because this area is selected on a new layer, I'm just going to click it, and I'm going to just call this bottom bar. Because it's selected, I have to remember to deselect, Command D, and now I can move on to the type. So I'm going to hit my type tool, T for type. I'm going to click somewhere in the area, and it's obviously massive. I'm going to select this point number here and just bring it down by dragging and pulling until I get something I like, which is around 50 points. And notice I've got Bebas new. This is by default like what I have. You could use impact, you could use whatever you want. I'm going to just select that because I like it, and I'm going to click the move tool. Now I can actually see this, and you'll notice that the color is whatever color I actually had last time, and it's also the wrong. I want to actually have a word here, so I'm going to double click the T button because that's not a real word, and I'm going to just type Denison, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to make it bigger. Let's make it a little bigger. That's good. And I'm going to open my character palette so I can actually change the fatness, make it 100% instead of 135. Yours is probably 100%. And I'm going to change the spacing to 0 because now it's a normal spacing. And then I'm going to click it, and I'm going to bring it down to the top of this bar. And I'm actually going to bring it down so that it actually goes, using the arrow keys, right to the edge, and then a couple more stops so that it looks like it's the same setup as same color as the bar. Now if it's not the same color, you can always select your text here, go to your color, and if you don't play with this thing, because this will change the color here, but if you move this out of the way and then move your cursor over an area it'll actually sample this color. So you can sample this color, for instance, and it makes it invisible. You can sample this color, and as long as you're not over here, it'll actually select that and sample it. So which is a really nice ability for you to be sampling colors. I'm going to move it in because this, remember, this is the edge. This is where they're cutting. So I'm going to move this in about that much, right? And now I've got the word Denison. And underneath, I would like the word university. So I'm going to hit the T for text tool, and I'm going to click somewhere right here, and I'm going to change the font to Times, something different, and I'm going to change the size to like 24. Let's see how that looks. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to make it a little bit wider, and I'm actually going to type the word university without a space because you can kind of see it right there. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to move it. Now, if I move it down here, you can see that I can't see the type. So I'm going to actually select it and change the type color. And I'm going to use this background. So there's like this inversion happening. I'm going to hit OK. It looks like it's disappeared, but actually it's just physically sitting here. And I'm going to pull it down. And remember, the reason I'm able to just pull stuff because I've got it selected in the layer here because I turned off the auto select. Otherwise, I would be selecting these backgrounds and they'd be moving all over the place. I'd like the word university a little larger, so I'm going to double click on it with the type tool to select it again, and then just widen it up a little bit until it kind of fits perfectly under the word Denison. And that looks pretty good. So already, I'm going to close this character palette up. If I command minus, you already see it's kind of looking nicely laid out. We're going to go ahead and bring in an image. So I'm just going to go to File, Open, and let's see what we've got to open. I've got the, what did I give you? I've got a logo. I've got this cool texture. Oh, here's the image I want, Denison Jpeg. I'm going to hit Open. And notice it opens in a new window. So you got the old window, and now you got a new tab. And remember how we did this? We moved that tab down for a moment so that we could see the background here and this tab layer, and we physically move that into this space. Now, if you did it some other way, you're going to have to rasterize this layer, but since we didn't have to do that, it's there. And notice it's at the top of the stack. So I'm going to move it under the bottom bar, and then now you can actually see how this card's starting to lay out. Let me use the move tool, and I've got this layer selected. I'm just gonna call it church. I could call it Swayze, whatever. And I'm gonna move it up here, and you can kind of see that I'd like it a little bit like this, but obviously it's not big enough at this point. So we're gonna transform this. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Command T, and that'll allow me to transform this, and I'm just gonna scale it and make it look the way I want. So maybe I don't want as, maybe I want something like this. This looks better. I like that. That's kind of okay. And I'm going to hit return. So now we've got our Denison University. We've got the logo. We've got the image of the chapel here, which is really nice. In the future, we'll be able to do so much more with these images, but this is kind of an okay layout. One last thing I'd like to do is add the logo to this. By the way, notice that this top part right here will be cut off, right? And maybe that's not what I want. So looking at that again, I'm like, no, I think I need it a little lower, which means Command T, I probably need it to be, well, I can't make it any smaller because then it'll be like missing here. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is, but bring it down a little bit. And I'm also going to dial it back a little bit, change the opacity so that I can really see the word Denison here because it's really being blocked. Maybe instead of making it that way, maybe I'll just bring it up. We'll do something so this pops a little bit more in a second. But what I need to do is also bring in the logo for the art department. So we're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to be opening this PNG logo. Now, you could open it in a separate window like we did here, and you'll notice this has transparency because it's a PNG. I can do this, and then I can physically move it over here, right? And you see it's massive. And obviously we'll be transforming that. I'm going to undo this, Command Z. Another possibility, obviously, is just to go to the desktop and find it, and then just physically drag it into the window here. and let go. And that's going to bring this logo in as well. Once you hit return, obviously we have to do what? We have to select the word and control click on it and select rasterize layer. Otherwise, again, it's a smart object, which normally is okay, but it's not going to be okay for this. All right. I'm going to move this up to the top of the stack so I can see the entire thing, and we're going to transform it, Command T, and make it smaller because we want it to fit at the bottom right-hand corner here. And we want to make sure it's in the trim line, so I'm going to zoom in, use my pan tool, spacebar, and up here, and I think I like it right. Remember, this is all going to go away, so we want to bring it in a certain amount. Everything else is trimmed away, so we want to bring it in 1/8 of an inch as well, so just so it kind of sits nicely inside the card. We're going to hit return when we're happy with our transform. And what I wish the logo was, I wish it was the same color or a color like white instead of black, because anything inside of this gray is kind of like, you know, I wanted it to be poppy white. And you can do this by actually inverting the colors. Under select, inverse, wherever that is, or maybe image, adjustment, invert. I never go this way. I always go Command I. So you're going to be using Command I all the time, so just use it. And notice that that inverts the colors. It makes the blacks white, white, black. It also would do it like if I did the church thing here and Command I, you can see it also inverts the colors, which might not be what you want for a photograph. But for a logo, that's exactly what I want on it. All right. Wish the background was a little darker so that this word Denison popped a little bit more. And there's a couple ways we could do that. I can go to the actual image itself. You can kind of see it right here. And I can actually go to image adjustments and then just play with the brightness slider, right? Just like we did before. So I can make this a little bit darker, lower the contrast, and lower the brightness. Not as good as I wish I could be, so I'm going to hit cancel. Another possibility is just to use a block of color that actually could be used as like a transparency or a gel. And we could do that by going to the marquee tool and creating a new layer above the church layer and calling this dark gel. And I'm going to select this area, maybe the whole card, and I'm going to use a nice, maybe dark purple, something really dark like this, but not too saturated. So if I go to saturation, I'm going to bring the saturation down, and the brightness, I still definitely want it dark. So I want something dark like a really rich purple. Hit OK, and then using the paint bucket tool, I'm just going to fill. All right, and now you can see it's completely occluding the church image, and I don't want that. And notice the selection lines. What do we do when we have selection lines? We go to select, deselect. All right, I'm going to go back to my move tool, so that's because I don't want to mess anything up. And I'm going to dial back the opacity, and already you see how this gel could actually function. It actually colorizes the image as well as kind of pushes it back in the background. So just having these large blocks of color or tone and then changing the opacity instantly gives you a nice looking layout. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to change the blend mode as well. So you can kind of see that when I do this, I'm going to even go back to 100% opacity and go to different blend modes. I just want to see how the blend mode interacts with the layers that I have here. So you can kind of see hard light, kind of liking that. I'm kind of liking that, but I need to dial it back. There's vivid light, there's difference. Some of these just don't work at all. But I like hard light, but I need to dial back the opacity so that it's a little more transparent. But this looks better to me than just using it with the opacity under normal. So here's what it looked like under normal, you see? And then here's what it looks like with hard light. It's a little bit more vivid and more intense. And that's it. I think I would like to bring the word up, this bar and this word and these letters and stuff up a little bit. So I'm going to group all of these bottom bars, the words, the letters, all together, create a group, and I'm going to leave the logo where it is, and I'm just going to select the group and move it physically up until I'm like happy with where it is here. And now I'm going to go into the group. See the bottom bar here inside of this group? Now I'm going to transform that one so that I can, and I'm going to hold the shift key down, and I'm going to just pull the bottom part down so that it goes a little bit lower. Now I'm going to move the logo a little bit because it needs to recenter. And that's where we're going to stop for now. So this is our card. Now remember, when you submit this card to the printer, they're going to be cutting everything off. But you're still going to submit it with the bleed. For this assignment, I would like you to now export this as a JPEG. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to select JPEG. That will crush all these layers, get rid of all the fonts, make everything into a photograph that you will be uploading. And I'm going to put Denison card 1, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. And that is what you will be uploading as your first file. And go ahead and just select 11 if you want, and hit OK. And that will now be a perfectly flat card, as you can kind of see from the card here. It's a perfectly flat card with the trim embedded, so it's bigger than it needs to be, but when they cut everything, all this stuff will be cut off. So that'll be the first thing you submit. The next one you submit is going to be something based on your own photographs. You can use the Denison University in the logo if you want, but you can also change the name and do something completely to your heart's content that shows a little bit of the stuff that we learned from the first video and from this video. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and save this, file save, and I'm going to just call it card 1. But I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file, because if I ever need to go back because I misspelled university, which could happen, I can always go back with these layers. The JPEG has no layers associated with it. Just to show you, Command O to open, and the desktop. And you can see if I open that JPEG, it's only a background. You do get the trim marks, which this is what I will see when you turn it in. I will look to see that you have the trim. I will look to see you have the guides, because that's coming in. But one of the things that's not coming in is any of those layers. So you definitely want to save it as both a Photoshop, and then what you submit to the printer is usually a JPEG. All right, I hope this helped a little bit, and I look forward to seeing what type of 4x6 inch card with 1/8 inch trim you design as your card number 2.jpg for this assignment.